after 70 years. That's what he goes there for, is to unlock the door.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Hustle. It's John Lamoureux. Okay, this is it. One of the biggest guests we've ever had, and one that most of our listeners know I have been trying to make happen for literally years. We're celebrating the kickoff of 2023 and our 400th episode with who I think is one of the greatest producers of all time, if not the greatest, the magnificent Trevor Horn. So Trevor, I think as everyone knows, he is known mostly as the man who invented the 80s, and that's for that work that he did with people like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Grace Jones, Dollar, Yes, ABC, Seal, you mentioned it. I love this man, as you know. That music is just, it's such glorious ear candy. The reason we were able to finally have him on the show is because he recently put out, which is sort of a musical autobiography. It's called Adventures in Modern Recording, From ABC to ZTT. I will say, when I did this interview, I had not received the book yet. And so I was not as informed going into it as I would have liked. I read the book it arrived shortly after this, and I read it over Christmas. It's one of the best music books I've ever read. Now, of course, I'm going to say that because I'm a super fan, but the word that keeps coming to mind is delicious. Every page is some juicy deliciousness about an artist or a process or his mind. I just wanted to understand what made Trevor Horn the producer that he was. And I didn't quite get there in this conversation, but I did in the book. I have a spare book to give away to a Patreon supporter, so listen up at the end of the podcast and I will tell you more about that. Now, with the good comes some of the bad. Unfortunately, we had glitchy Wi-Fi almost the entire conversation. So here I finally get to talk to the man that I've been wanting to talk to almost more than anyone else, and it is not the ideal situation because technology was not our friend. Now, when you listen to this, Jan will have cleaned it up so that you can tell, so that you can, it's a more coherent conversation. But in reality, it was super buggy and laggy, and I can't, because we're both freezing on each other, you can't tell when the other person's really done talking. It was not the experience that I really wanted to have. It's been a little heartbreaking, to be completely honest with you. I finally get the person that I've always wanted to talk to, and it wasn't quite what I wanted it to be because technology didn't cooperate. Anyway, at least it happened. And so in this conversation, we get into people like Seal, Simple Minds, Yes, Grace Jones, Mark Almond, ABC, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, all of those bands, all the ones that he's really known for. And I cannot stress this enough to you. Please check out this book. First of all, if you like Trevor, it's a must read. But if you're even a fan of 80s music and you want to know more about how he's basically was the architect of that time, this is the book to help you do that, okay? Anyway, I think you're going to enjoy this one way or the other. Again, it wasn't the exact experience that I wanted to have, but he's still one of my musical heroes and one of the greatest minds that music has ever put out there, and the book is fantastic. He called me from his home in London. I've been wanting to do this for years, and so I'm trying to think, where do I want to begin with Trevor Horn? Because there are so many great projects that have changed my life that I want to get into, and I think the first place I want to go is Seal, because the first album especially that you did with him is, I was thinking about it getting ready to talk to you. I think 3 of your albums are in my top 20 or so favorite albums of all time, and that's one of them. And the thing that I've always appreciated about that album in particular is the melding of kind of what sounds like, anyway, organic instruments with kind of dance beats. Yeah. And your sound is typically so grandiose and orchestrated, and yet there's moments on that album that require minimalism, like Whirlpool or something like that. And I just think, how does Trevor Horn decide when to step back and when to go full Trevor Horn on somebody? And I'm thinking of Seal in particular.
Well, I think the Seal records were quite different from the Frankie Goes to Hollywood records.
They sure were, yeah.
It was a different challenge, really. The music was quite different. The Seal was quite different. And really, it was all about a singer. And and presenting him in the best possible way. And there was something the first album, he was kind of playing the guitar and writing something really fast, and coming up with things. So I had different sorts of challenges, because Seal didn't write sort of straightforward songs.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of different.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to figure out a way of, they didn't, it wasn't like 8 bars, a bridge, and then
Mm-hmm.
it was all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what really made it interesting,
Yeah.
And I think it's a good album as as an album,
Yeah, I agree. Start to finish.
Yeah.
One of the songs on it in particular that I wanted to ask you about was Deep Water.
Both of them swam from a northern blue sky. Smile on their faces, they entered their doom like they knew. If they wash them, they won't care about that anyway. I change the water and I burn the fire. You play with chemicals, making their doom like you knew. If they wash them, you won't care about that anyway. Maybe that's the way you live your life, but I know life, it don't always live that way. Jade, a shade of pain, and then we die. Jade, a shade of pain, and then we die. Jade, a shade of pain, and then we die. But it's just the way, baby, that's the way you live it up, I know.
Because it sort of starts out as this acoustic-y, almost bluesy type thing, and then it becomes what it becomes in this more, like I said, sort of orchestrated, very gorgeous ballad with some synth lines and some strings. You're the mastermind of most projects you work on. Is
let me tell you
Seal's
about
vision or is it your vision?
Well, Seal had the first part, and both of them swam from a northern blue sky.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about dolphins or something, and he had the second part as well, but he didn't know how to join them together, or he hadn't thought of them as the same song. He just had the two ideas, and I said, well, I tell you what we could do is we could go into a miasma in the middle with an orchestra, where we just go off and float, and then we come out with the second song. And he was up for it, so that's what we did. It worked.
Wow. So yeah, I love that track too. So in his mind, that started out as two different songs, and you came with the idea of melding them with that, as you said, miasma. That's perfect. Okay, so another question I have about that album in particular is Violet.
Change the chair and seem to think that's alright. I understand you need a change. When you make that change, don't look to see I'm alright. Now that I look at you in different light, about you. That's alright. I understand you need a change, and when you make that change, then the world will elevate you. And if I told you then that I could cry, would you take my tears and watch the sunrise? I'm not afraid. There's no shame.
I love putting on Violet and just getting lost. It's 8 minutes of just pleasure, And so my question, there's a couple of them. One,
who decided that song needed to be 8 minutes long? Is it you? And then two, well, answer that one first, then I'll throw my second one at you.
Well, I suppose it's Seal, really, because
Really?
he kept going with it. And it was such a lovely mood.
I had the
It's the last track of the
VHS.
album.
It is. I had a VHS tape of the recording or something of that album, and that just has like a stripped down, unplugged acoustic version, which is also very lovely. And I thought, I wonder if this began as this, but Trevor heard it as what we hear on the album.
No, I tell you, the really cool synth stuff on that is a synth programmer called Guy Sigsworth.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Jamie Mahobarak sort of added to it.
Okay.
But it was his. It was beautiful, and it was one of the Seal had done that track, or he'd definitely started it because it was actually the first thing he ever sang to me. He had a backing track of it, and he put it on and sang, "Ooh, I watch you comb your hair in a different light." That. Yeah. God, yeah, I fucking loved it.
I love that. Okay, your relationship with Seal has taken many forms over the years, and sometimes it seems, and I wonder if this is kind of like a Meatloaf and Jim Steinman thing, where where Meatloaf is just sometimes, fortunately or unfortunately, more powerful when he teams up with Jim than he is on his own, but he doesn't want to accept that in his life. He wants to believe he can do it himself, and sometimes he does, but it's never quite there. Is that what goes on with the Seal dynamic?
I think if Seal works with a really good producer, like he worked with David Foster on the first solo album, it did incredibly well. I think if Seal works with a really good producer, it'll be successful.
Yeah.
It depends on it doesn't have to be me. It can be another producer. Just somebody who takes care. And David Foster did a good job of that record.
Yeah. Another one I wanted to, okay, so Seal, you finally win the Grammy for Kiss from a Rose. That second album is still great. Yeah. It feels a little slicker maybe, or more adult contemporary or something. Maybe I'm way off. When you go into that second album, what's the mandate? Are you thinking we need to take you to another level, a different place, keep it going? What's the mandate on that album?
Get all the songs to work and make a really good album. I think the second album started off. We had when I heard "Bring It On," I really liked "Bring It On." I just liked the whole sentiment of it and the whole vibe of it. But second albums are normally a total nightmare because you don't have the material and whatever. But Seal had "Kiss from a Rose." While we were making the first album, at some point he said to me, "I've written this funny song. It's like a kind of Greensleeves or something. It's like a folk song, like an Elizabethan folk song kind of thing."
There used to be a graying tower alone on the sea. You became the light on the dark side of me. Love remains a drug that's the high and not the pill. But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can't be seen? Baby, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on the grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, stranger it feels, yeah. And now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on the grave. There is so much a man can tell you, so much he can say.
And I was like, "No, well, that sounds interesting." So when we were starting the second album, I said to him, "What about that Elizabethan folk song thing you talked about? I'd like to hear that." He made a demo of "Kiss from a Rose," and it was a brilliant demo. It was pretty much the song that you hear there, and I think the only change I made was I took the middle eight down a tone.
Okay.
or something, and put a 3/8 bar in the verse. But apart from that, see, well, the whole, it was all.
Wow.
It was great. It was a really cool demo, and I mean, I loved it from the first time I heard it. I was bit. It took me a while to figure out how to do it, and to be honest, for a while after the album had been out, I thought that I'd kind of got it wrong. That I
Oh,
should have been
really?
more electronic with it in some way.
Hmm.
Adamski did such a great remix of it called "Kicks from the Roads" that I
Oh, I haven't
liked.
heard that one.
Yeah, it's really cool. But then, of course, we ended up getting a Grammy for it. It just shows you how things change. You know,
Kidding. No kidding.
I think
Okay.
with "Kiss from a Rose," people just needed to hear it
Yeah.
because it was so different. It was so interesting
Hmm.
and so fresh, and all those harmony vocals that Seal did. It's all
Yeah.
Seal. There's every single harmony on the second album is all Seal. There's not many
Really?
people that can do their own harmonies like that.
No.
Yeah,
And it's
there's no
so
session singers or any girl singers or anything.
those big soaring vocals and the chorus and
So
everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the second album, when you say AOI, was actually more alternative, really, because so Prayer for the Dying was #1 alternative for ages. You couldn't turn the radio on in
I
LA
love that
without
song.
hearing it.
Yeah.
And that wasn't really a rock track. I
No.
mean, I don't know what it was, but it was really cool,
Yeah.
It's
I
just like very musical.
Yes. If I said AOR, I think I meant adult contemporary. It was
Yeah,
it was just slightly more mature. But of course, it's the second album, so why wouldn't it be mature? Um,
yeah.
okay, I want to ask you about the Simple Minds project, Street Fighting Years. This was I have a lot of mixed feelings about this album because they're one of my favorite bands ever as well. But that album was not the right. In America, in the UK, it was different. But in America, it was probably not viewed as the right album to follow Once Upon a Time when they had finally broken through. And so I'm curious what your experience was like working with them on that. Because I've heard that there was like writer's block going on and that some of the songs are really grandiose because they weren't sure what they even had. But I don't know if that's true.
They didn't have a big hit single for
Yeah.
America. He gets a big hit single for England.
Me down by the gallows tree, for it's sad news I bring about this old town and all that it's offering. Some say trouble's abound. Someday soon they're gonna pull the old town down. One day we'll return here when the Belfast child sings again. Brothers, sisters, where are you now? As I look for you right through the crowd. All my life here I've spent with my faith in God and church and the government. Some say trouble.
Yeah.
In Britain,
Belfast
the
Child.
UK, because we Belfast Child, we got a lot of awards for that. But no, they didn't have a big single for America. But at the time, they just didn't feel like they wanted to wait and try and find it or write it. So they wanted to move on.
Okay. Was that it feels like a well, a lot of your stuff does. Feels like an album that was labored over. Was that a fun project? Was it difficult? Was it any different than any other project you've worked on?
When you say laboured over, I hope it didn't sound that laboured.
Just, it's so
Uh,
grandiose. How do we make this even bigger,
Well, working with a band is always trickier than working with session guys. You have to deal with personalities.
Yeah.
Whereas when you deal with session guys, the reason they're there is because you like them and you have an empathy with them. So it can be quite quite long sometimes because you're depending on people in the band. Some of it would be quick, you know. The Nelson song was one day, you know.
Mm, mm.
Some of the others took a bit more time.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about your book. My understanding, I haven't read it yet, obviously, but I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait. It touches on 23 songs that either you worked on or were influential for you to work on. And I'm thinking, there's got you probably had to cut hundreds of we all do, you know. I don't know that I could narrow down my life to 23 songs. This project I think has been coming on, you've been working on it for a while. Why was now the time to put out this book?
Well, it's better than going on reality TV.
It always is. Anything's better than that.
Why did I put it out now? Yeah, it's a good question. I asked myself that a few times. I tell you why. Because this book company showed a lot of interest and were dead eager. And I had written a few of the chapters already, and I had them hanging around. And I thought, well, why not do it? You know, I thought I might as well do it if I'm too old. So I did it.
Yeah. Well, you said might as. I mean, you have to have been approached about writing a book for decades, right?
Oh, sometimes people have talked about it, yeah, and somebody started one, but I hated it. So,
someone wrote one about you. Okay.
Yeah. So, see, you know, and the thing is, record producers, you know, nobody really knows what you do. So, so I guess maybe if you read the book, it explains it a little bit. You know, you're the one hustling that gets the record finished, whatever it takes. You know, well, everybody else is having a great time. You're worrying about it because you've got to deliver the finished thing.
That's right.
I mean, you know, some things you go in and they come out great, but there's no story in them, you know. So I've obviously picked the ones where there's a bit of a story.
Yeah.
Where you know, there were, I mean, things like Slave to the Rhythm. But there's lots of things that I've done, you know. I mean, the book just scrapes the surface, really. And so many things you have to take out because, you know, all kinds of things for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, you've had quite a life outside of music too. I don't know. Do you cover that part? I mean, some real ups and downs, some hard times. You don't get into that. No. This is strictly a music book.
No, strictly music. Okay. I mentioned my late wife quite frequently, but only in the context that I dedicated the book to her.
Okay, great.
Because she was very, very important, but I don't sort of.
It's not an autobiography, right? Adventures in Modern Recording. It is what it says it is. It's not.
No.
Okay.
No, it is what it says. It's about time in the studio. I think that's what people are interested in.
Yeah.
Anyway. And records were adventurous. They were adventure, you know. So
yeah, okay, good. I can't. I've had friends
like now. I hear lots of good records.
Yeah. I've had friends who know how much I love you, and they'll text me pictures of that their book arrived and everything, and I can't wait to read it. This is this is like the pot of gold at the end of a lifetime of loving you, Rainbow. You know, I can't. It's some of us have been dying for this moment, you know, for decades to learn from you. So I'm excited to read it. I wanted to ask you about. Okay, so there's several.
I don't know if you're going to learn much about record. No.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say I don't know if you'll learn much about the practicalities of record production from the book.
Well, I'm not a record producer. I'm mostly what I'm fascinated by is what goes on in your head. The sound that you hear in your head changed the world and improved millions of people's lives. And that comes down to you. Not every producer can say that. Most producers, well, I don't know. A lot of producers are there to enhance what's already great about an artist. And you do that, but you elevate it even more. And very few people have had that effect on the world, but you have. That's the thing that I want to understand about Trevor Horn.
Yeah. Well, maybe I don't understand it, so I don't know if I could explain it. I had a different background to lots of people in the music business. In the 70s, I started, I grew up with sort of dance band music, and I wasn't really like a rock and roller or anything like that. In fact, I could never, the blues and stuff like that. I used to wonder why people wanted to play the blues. I understand now a lot more than I did then, but back then I didn't. And so by the time I kind of got to 30, and I actually, had the first hit, and lots of the things that I liked, I tried to get into the records I made, a kind of a sort of sense of romance or harmony, that records wouldn't normally have. Because I like records so much, I could look for the bits that make you really like a record, because it isn't, it's, it's the corners and the way that thing progresses. There's all kinds of things that make a really good record. But, for a while, it's like having a time where you understand something and most of the people around you don't.
Yeah.
Like what to do with a Fairlight. I mean, Peter Gabriel was using it, and so was Kate Bush, but no one was using it in sort of mainstream pop. No one had got there yet, if you get my drift.
Sure.
And what you could do with it. And I guess I was in a good position because I'd been a musician, so I could judge other musicians. I knew who was good, you know what I mean? So I could hire really good people. And obviously being a musician, I knew how to get the best out of them, how to treat them, not like be an arsehole, you know what I mean? Be kind and make them feel like they can, like they can come up with anything, I always used to say to the assistants, I won't fire you for arguing with me if you see I'm doing something that I shouldn't do. I said, but if you see something and you don't tell me, then I'll be angry with you. Right? You've got to tell me. And I won't drop you in it. You don't drop me in it, right?
Yeah.
So I never if somebody's angry about something, I want to say, well, he did it,
Yeah.
It's very important, those kind of things, and the sort of vibe that you keep around you with the musicians. And I had a really sort of fertile period because, getting your hands on the technology first, being able to do a record like Out of a Lonely Heart. It was great, then it just becomes part of the language.
Yeah.
But then it was really exciting, and people always remember the first time they heard things.
Oh boy.
Lenny
So
Kravitz
true.
said that. Yeah. I was walking through Soho House in LA, and Lenny Kravitz was sitting at the table. He jumped up and introduced himself. And he said the first time he ever heard the Owner of a Lonely Heart, he pulled over, listened to it, and he had no idea what we were doing.
Yeah.
He said he knows now what we were doing, but back then,
Yes,
he didn't know what we were doing. So,
oh man, yeah, that's one of the high water marks. Yeah.
I mean, I made that record in 1983. That's but I mean, that record was also because, you know, if you think about it, Yes had been playing stadiums all the way through the 70s. They were like, all of them were brilliant players, you know, and technology interested them too, you know. Once they sort of got into it, they liked the idea of it.
Yeah.
You know, the getting to play with a drum machine wasn't easy, but
So I got to ask you about that. I've had, as I said, I've talked to so many people that have worked with you. Both Gary Langan was on here and Tony Kaye from Yes were on here.
Oh, wow,
and,
Tony Kaye.
Yeah, and whenever I mention Leave It, they both get this sort of kind of exhausted look on their face because that song took so much work.
One down, one to go, another town and one more show. Downtown, you're giving away, but you never came back. No phone to take your place, do you know what I mean? We have the same intrigue as the Court of Kings.
And I wonder what made you. Did you have the idea for a song like Leave It, and Yes happened to be there, and so you put it on them?
No.
Or was there something inherent about Yes that you thought, let's try this?
Leave It took a bit of time because we did it initially. It was a song they had. Dang, 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 dang. Leave It. Basically, we sort of did it and wrote it on the fly in a North London studio. I can't remember the name, in Willesden. It was some of the best for me, some of the most fun on the record because it came up with that idea for the boom do zip, that bit. I thought it was great when we did that. I was really excited by that.
Wow.
And then it just seemed to get better and better for me. I've got a writing credit on that because I wrote all the lyrics.
Oh.
And it was basically, they just had Leave It. And I think I wrote the rest.
Wow. One down, there you go.
One down, one to go. Another town, another show. Downtown, you're giving away what you never get back.
Oh.
No phone can take your place. Do you know what I mean?
We
have the same intrigue as a Court of Kings. It was about being unfaithful on the road. I think that's what they were trying to sing about.
Wow. That's great. Okay. I have Patreon supporters, and I always let them know who I'm talking to, and they can submit questions. I got a few for you. I'll try and get to a lot of them, but one of them in particular relates to Yes. One of the listeners, Sugar Mouse, that's their name. I love that name. I don't know who they are, but I think that's genius. He wanted to know, he or she, whoever they are, they wanted to know about the keyboard intro coda to Changes. They said it's so off kilter, it's tough to play, it's totally unique. Who thought of the intro to Changes?
Trevor Rabin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 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 I never bothered counting it. I didn't have to play it. It's really cool, though, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. 90125 is another one of the albums you worked on that's in my top 20 or so of all time. Okay, you mentioned earlier Slave to the Rhythm.
I'm just playing around, baby. Left for days, men who know wheels must turn to keep the flow. Build on up, don't break the chain. Sparks will fly when the whistle blows. Never stop the action. Keep it up, keep it up. Never stop the action. Keep it up. Work to the rhythm. Live to the rhythm. Love to the rhythm. Slave to the rhythm.
And I have a lot of questions about that one too, because, and the first one I'm curious about, Grace feels like a guest on her own album, that is almost more you in visualizing what an album for Grace Jones should sound like. And she sort of provides the singing, but all of the rest is yours. And I think Slave to the Rhythm is one of your absolute masterpieces. Bruce Woolley was on here and we talked about that. This might sound like a tough question. I hope it doesn't, but does the artist matter sometimes? You know, do they have input? Do you look at Grace Jones and think, I know what's going to be great for her? Slave to the Rhythm. Does she, I know it was a Frankie song first, but does she inspire this? Are these ideas you have that you're just looking for the right vessel to place them in? I know that's a lot of questions and I'm sorry, but that's what I want to know.
No, well, the reason it came up was it was a song that Bruce Woolley and Simon Darlow had written, and at the time I thought the title was better than the song. Right? Thought the song was okay, and we worked on it with as a potential second Frankie single because the Frankie demos didn't give us any confidence that there was an obvious second single there, you know. But it didn't work.
Let me stop you for a second. I'm curious because if you're ultimately using
you've heard all of this, right?
Well, I've heard a lot of it, yeah. But let me ask you about this. So if you're ultimately using session musicians on the Frankie album, the only aspect I'm guessing that wouldn't work is Holly's voice. Is that right?
No, I'm not. I wasn't using. I mean, when you say using session musicians, yes. The engineer, the guy that engineered, also was a really cool guitar player, Steve Lipson, who went on to be a really big producer, you know.
Yeah, he and I are talking soon too.
Yeah, so the Frankie thing, you know, I think I say it in the book, when we signed the band, the guitar player that was in the band wasn't the guy that played on the demos, you know. It was another guy, and he'd only been playing for 6 weeks. So he couldn't play. So we needed to. As the time went by the time we got to the end of the record, he could play because he worked on it, you know. But it does take a while to learn to play the guitar. So Steve did all the guitar, and one guy did all the keyboards. But you know, that was the extent of session musicians, apart from the orchestra here and there. What were you saying about Holly's voice?
Well, I wondered if that's why it didn't work. If you had access to all the same musicians and sound and production that ultimately went on Grace's song, the only thing that really would have been different was Holly's voice. And so I wonder if that's why it didn't work. But you're saying
why what didn't work?
Why Slave to the Rhythm didn't work for a Frankie song, but it did work for a Grace song.
Well, do you know what? It didn't work for exactly the same reason that it initially didn't work with Grace, because we did a version of the song with Grace, you know, where it was slave to the rhythm. It's very square, very very sort of Germanic beat, that was the same kind of beat that we'd used with the Frankies. The only rhythm I'd heard at the time that was new was go-go, and I had no idea how the song was going to fit. I kind of thought maybe do work all day. Yeah, I could see that maybe, that might fit. What I didn't expect was that Bruce would come up with those fabulous chords. Which suddenly, really made the whole thing. It's what everybody really likes about it. The chords are so beautiful.
Yeah.
That's why I went to New York and tried using the drummer from Experience Unlimited and the percussion player from Experience Unlimited, I think, and then the bass player from Chuck Brown and
oh, sure, yeah.
Is it Chuck Brown? Yeah. So
the go-go.
But the problem, I couldn't get them. Chuck Brown, the Soul Searchers.
Yeah, Bustin' Loose. Yeah,
talking about money. It was very obvious that they couldn't learn an arrangement, so I had to think of another way around it. Arrangements in go-go is start and stop. That's the arrangement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shit happens in between. Nobody quite knows what. I'm trying to orchestrate it, with odd numbers of bars.
Yeah.
Hopeless. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So does Grace just swoop in and sing her vocals? Ian McShane is on there, doing some narration. You masterminded that thing, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. Well, I thought that I really liked what this young journalist, I think his name's Barney Hoskins.
Oh, sure. Yeah. He's great.
I really liked his writing. And I asked him if he would write something for the record,
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote he gave me like 3 or 4 paragraphs. That whole rhythm is both the songs,
yeah,
blah blah, all that bit. And my brother-in-law is an actor, and he tried doing it, but it was okay. It was okay when he did it.
Uh-huh.
But I wasn't totally convinced, because he and he said you might need somebody better than me. And I was just having fish and chips and jars, and there was what's his name?
Ian McShane.
Ian McShane, yeah. And of course I knew him because he was a bit of a Yes fan.
Oh.
So I immediately went over and said, Ian, what are you doing after this? Do you want to come and talk on the record? And he was like, I said, Ian, Orson Welles is dead, so only you'll do. Something like that.
Right.
But he's an old Yes fan, and I did know him because we stayed in touch a bit, and I did used to see him, so I knew him. And he came in, I gotta say, he did it in one fucking take, man. It was amazing.
Wow.
He just read it off, and what a voice.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay. I want to ask you too about Mark Almond. I love the Tenement Symphony album, and you, I believe, do the second half of that, which is more of the symphonic part.
And if one day I should become a singer with a Spanish bum who sings for women of great virtue, I'd sing to them with a guitar I borrowed from a coffee bar. Well, what you don't know doesn't hurt you. My name would be Antonio, and on my bridges I would burn. When I'd give them some they'd know, I'd expect something in return. I'd have to get drunk every night and talk about virility with some old grandmother that might be decked out like a Christmas tree. No pink elephants I'd see, though I'd be drunk as I could be. I'd sing that song they sang to me about the time they called me Jackie. If I could be for only an hour, if I could be for an hour every day, if I could be for just one little hour, cute in a stupid ass way.
So I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Yeah.
And my family, we moved to Cambridge, England in 1991. And that song was
Right.
big on the radio at the time. And it's the exact kind of song that you would never hear on top 40 radio in the States. You might hear it on alternative radio, but not top 40. And that song takes me back to just landing in London and realizing I get all the music I love is at my fingertips where it isn't in the States, you know? Tell me about working with Mark on that project in particular.
That was Days of Pearly Spencer.
That too.
A tenement, a dirty street, walked and worn by shoeless feet. Inside its lawn, so complete, watched by a shivering sun. Old eyes in a small child's face, watching as the shadows race through walls and cracks, leave no trace in daylight's brightness shone. The days of Pearly Spencer. The race is almost run. Nose pressed hard on frosted glass, gazing as the swollen mass on concrete fields where grows no grass, he stumbles blindly on. Iron trees smother the air with withering, they stand and stare through eyes that neither know nor care where the grass has gone. Days of Pearly Spencer. The race is almost run. Pearly wears your milk white skin. What's that stubble on your chin?
So little bit of trivia for you. My daughter, who's 15, that growing up was her very favorite song. And so we've listened to that song a billion times.
So which other song were you referring to?
I was like, the whole Jackie, Pearly Spencer, Hand Over My Heart. You did all of those.
Yeah. Right, and it starts off with a bit of Debussy. Yeah, I was really into Debussy at the time. What was it like working with Mark? Well, I tell you what was fun about that was working with Anne, because
oh, sure, she's the best.
Yeah, because we couldn't find. I remember when we started making that record, we couldn't find a drum loop to work with it, so we made our own drum loop because it's like a vintage feel, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And none of the drum loops did that, so we got a drummer and we made our own drum loop. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a funny old feel.
Yeah.
But I always loved the end, the end of the Days of Pearly Spencer, where it goes off with the French horns and everything. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Mark was nice to work with. That's kind of all I recall, really.
Okay. When you executive produce a project, like I believe speaking of I think Big Generator. I don't know if you're the actual producer or the executive producer of an album like that.
No, what happened with Big Generator is I did the backing tracks.
Oh.
With the band out in Italy, and then I bailed.
Oh, okay. Why'd you bail?
For numerous reasons.
Okay.
There was too much strife in the band at the time.
Oh, I believe it. Success does funny things to people, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There just wasn't the urgency that there was when we were doing 90125.
I love that album too. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. So going back to Jackie for a second, is it Anne is it real strings on that, or is it?
Oh, you're kidding, yeah.
Okay, it sounds like it. Yes.
What it is, I did the rhythm track in Berlin with a bunch of German programmers, and then I put a 50-piece orchestra on it.
Oof.
That's the days when you could afford it. Yeah.
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your Reimagines the 80s album, because that's a symphonic piece too, and I believe it's the SARM Orchestra, so it's that's what it's labeled anyway. I assume
it's all the A team.
Okay, yeah.
That's all the English A team. They're really great players.
Yeah. There are some moments on that album that like for instance, the "What's Love Got to Do with It" with Tony Hadley. He's been on here, by
Yeah.
the way. I like that version better than the original.
You must understand that the touch of your hand makes my pulse react. That it's only the thrill of boy meeting girl, opposites attract. It's physical, only logical. You must try to ignore that it means more than that. Whoa, what's love got to do with it? What's love but a second-hand emotion? What's love got to do with it? Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken? It may seem to you that I'm acting.
How did
Oh,
you
right.
go about picking the songs for that? Because they're not all yours. There's, I mean,
Well,
Bruce is
hardly
on
any of
there
them.
and Joe Jackson.
Yeah, well, I just threw all the songs from the 80s and thought which ones I'd like to do.
Mm.
I've done the same thing again, but this time not symphonic.
Really? Do you have a new
Just
one
looking
coming
back
out?
for songs that are worth doing with, you know?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it won't be till the middle of next year.
Okay. Ooh, that's going to be
It's not a
great.
big extra this time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
How come there has
Yeah.
never been a proper Trevor Horn album? I mean, maybe you view the Buggles as that, or maybe your production work speaks for itself, but did you ever have an inclination to come up with your own Trevor Horn album at some point along the way?
I've done one, just figuring out how out.
Oh,
I've done one
really?
called High, which is me singing a whole bunch of songs that when I grew up, you know,
Ooh,
mainly
okay.
from the 50s and the 60s,
Yeah.
songs that I heard when I was a kid that affected me. And a couple more modern ones, but not many.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
I just
So,
haven't figured it. I'm working on the art. I finished the record because the record itself is like a bunch of demos. You know, it's like drum machines meet. It's quite interesting.
okay.
So I have done.
Okay.
That's the answer.
Good. I can't wait to hear it. That's going to be great. I have sort of a philosophical question for you. You're one of music's great geniuses.
Right.
And I wonder if you feel like genius has a shelf life. Well, it's true. You know it's true. We all know it's true. But like, you know, if we were talking about an athlete, Michael Jordan's prime period, because of his physicality and his age, can only last in a certain window. Whereas an artist can go on who knows how long, you know? Do you feel like you were especially on fire at a particular time, or do you feel like you've never lost that?
That's a difficult question to answer without saying things that you don't want to say.
Oh, okay.
I think anybody. I think it's. I'm amazed that people are still interested in something from which is essentially, you know, the decade that started 40 years ago. But I suppose it's the demographic of the people that are alive now. I'm still making records, so
okay.
But you know, I'm not producing Adele or
You should.
Whatever.
I wish.
I don't know about that. I think our guys do a really good job, you know.
Yeah.
And obviously, the older you get, you know, I still love to work with a young band if I saw one that I thought had real promise, and I've seen one or two, you know, just on a couple of tracks, not, you know, whole albums. such a commitment, and for people are not so interested in albums now. I always liked albums,
Me too.
But if you think about it, the way I used to look at it was a single's a record, an album's an artist.
Yes.
Just one record, that's the record.
Good point.
And sometimes you can sense people are going when an album's going to, some of the best albums I've done, whilst I've had a single from the band that I was working with in literally in the charts at the same time.
True.
And I was working night and day to get the album finished. But like with ABC or with Seal on the first album. Mm-hmm. But that's really, when you've got that, that's an exciting moment, because people are going to listen to you.
Yeah.
And I knew that people were going to buy Seal's album. I just could feel it, because I could see that they could sense that it was going to be worth it.
Yeah.
So I was very aware of trying to make it worth it.
Good.
So that answers the question.
Do you feel like America embraced what you were doing as much? I had never considered it before getting ready to talk to you, but so many of the projects that you're known for are known worldwide, but primarily, I guess, in the UK. When you were working, did you ever feel like we need to do something more to break the States or differently, or were you not factoring that in?
Well, I guess, Owner was number one. I think the album got to number one or number two.
Yeah, that's true.
And so people knew of me from that. Video Killed the Radio Star was never actually a hit single in America, but it was so ubiquitous.
Yeah.
All over the world. I never really got to work with an American band, particularly. I met a few and talked to them and whatever, but it never came about.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that.
No, it never happened. And I worked on films over there and made a lot of records over there. Used a lot of American musicians.
Yeah.
But I didn't work with very, only one-off things here and there.
Okay, that makes sense. I never thought of that before. I wanted to ask you about playing with Dire Straits' Legacy. That how's that going?
Oh, I really enjoy it.
Really?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard touring, but it's just great to play with. We've got the musicianship in that band is so good. The keyboard player, piano player, is the original piano player from Dire Straits, a guy called Alan Clark.
That was one of my Patreon supporters again. Scott Stevenson brought that up, and I had similar questions too. It amazes me, or I find it so interesting, what producers like you choose to put their time and effort into. And, a guy who defined the 80s, feels like at this stage in my life, what makes me happy is playing with Dire Straits' Legacy. I don't know that would have been what people picked. That's not a knock on Dire Straits, but there's not a long, you didn't produce Dire Straits that I know of back in the day.
No.
So why is that the project for you?
Well, because I'm just a bass player and I can just enjoy playing the bass guitar.
Yeah.
That's what I try and do most of the time. And I never played bass in a rock band. I played bass for a living till I was 30. That's how I supported myself. But I was always reading the charts, or whatever. I was never in a rock and roll band. To actually learn how to play rock and roll and what it's like, I really enjoy it. It's different. And I'm prepared to put up with a bit of discomfort to do it, just to play with those guys. No backing tracks or anything stupid like that. Just playing.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge to do.
That's wild. I hope you guys come to the States.
Next year I'm probably going out with. I'm probably coming out with Seal.
Oh,
playing the first two albums.
Oh,
yeah. That's what we're talking about.
Oh man, that would be a dream come true. Okay, rapid fire.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw some quick questions at you. One in particular, another patron, Pat Francis, wanted to know what happened to Rod Stewart's Lost album that you worked on.
They'll probably dig it out somewhere in the future.
Maybe after he leaves.
But eight songs.
Okay. Huh. That's too bad. Okay, another question for you. ABC, Lexicon of Love, that's the third of the three that I mentioned that are in my top whatever.
Right.
They never quite sounded like that again. They tried. A lot of those synth bands try on their next album to prove they're a little grittier than they were on the first one. I was curious why Alphabet Soup did not end up on the final album.
I only did Lexicon of Love.
Yeah,
I
it's
wasn't part of it.
yeah. There's the deluxe version of Lexicon of Love
Right.
includes all these other tracks that didn't end up on it, like Into the Valley of the Heathen.
Into the valley of the heathen go. Into the valley of the heathen go. Riding out across the USA. Riding out across the world. Into the valley of the heathen go. Into the valley of the heathen go. Make that bitch scream. Woo. Let's rock. Woo. Guitar solo. Oh!
And
Oh yeah, Into the Valley of the Heathen Run. Well, that
Yeah.
was a joke. That was something Martin used to do, just for a laugh, you know.
oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have to look at that. I wasn't aware of that's existence.
It's on the deluxe edition, deluxe release of Lexicon of Love, which I have.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
should look at that.
It's great.
Yeah, they went for a grittier sound. I actually liked the second album, Beauty Stab, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked a lot of the songs on it. Yeah, I mean, Lexicon
Okay.
was going to be always going to be a hard album. And it was all about one thing, you know.
Yeah.
That's always a good idea. But I liked a lot of the stuff on Beauty Stab.
I do too. I love them. When they come, when you sign on to work with somebody like ABC, is there something inherent about that band that makes you hear what you hear in your head that comes out on the album? Like
Yeah, of
demos
course.
or
Of
personalities or
course.
what?
Yeah,
Okay.
of course. It's all about personalities. You go and meet them. If you're going to be messing with people's music or helping them do it. When I first met them, they played me Poison Arrow.
If I were to say to you, can you keep a secret? Would you know just what to do or where to keep it? Then I say I love you, foul a situation. Hey girl, I thought we were the right combination. Who broke my heart? You did. Hold to the target, blame Cupid. You think you're smart, stupid. Shoot that poison arrow through my heart. Shoot that poison arrow. Shoot that poison arrow through my heart. Shoot that poison arrow. No rhythm in cymbals, no tempo in drums. Love on arrival, she comes when she comes. Right on the target, but wide of the mark. What I thought was fire was only the spark. The sweetest melody is an unheard refrain. So lower your sight.
And there was a bit in Poison Arrow that was a bit sort of wide open. And I said to them, what's going in there? and they said, "Oh, we thought we could have the sound of a station and somebody saying something." And I was a bit like, "That's a good idea." I was into that. I was into that. So I thought, wow, I could work with these guys. They're bright, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
They're funny, and they're engaging, and the whole sort of the song "Shoot That Poison Arrow"
Hmm.
was such a, the lyric was great, you know. So you get involved, and you know, they'd only made a couple of records, and they were up for doing whatever they had to do. They wanted to
Okay.
make a really good record.
What about Frankie then?
Yeah.
Because you saw something in them that made you decide that Relax and all of that, you wanted to put your stamp on it, but then a lot of them don't play on the album. What is it
I didn't want
about
to put
Frankie
my
that you
stamp on it. I wanted to make it into. I heard the song. I thought the song just relax, don't do it when you
uh-huh,
want to go to it. I
uh-huh,
just thought it. I thought that it had that sort of bonehead, simple
uh-huh,
appeal that sometimes things have. You know.
uh-huh,
I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I just thought it sounded like something, you know. And I hear lots of things. People always playing me songs, but most of the time they're like formula things, you know, or
uh-huh.
like a professional song or something like that. And you know, I'm not that interested in Smell a Rat straight away, you know. Not Smell a Rat, but you know what I mean.
Sure.
It's like
Yeah.
in 99% of what I listen to, or you say, oh, it's one of those, it's like that. I've heard this one before, but I'd not heard Relax before. It was interesting. There was something different about it. And Holly's voice had a sound to it
Mm-hmm.
that was like supercharged, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the combination of the two things, the boom, 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 I thought, yeah, I just thought I can do something with it.
Huh. Is
I
the
wouldn't be surprised if nobody else saw what could be done with it,
oh,
because
I'm sure.
well, maybe they did. You know, I didn't see the final record when I heard it. I hadn't a fucking clue what I was going to do with it, and you know, I was just going to record. I was going to start off record their version and just go from there.
Uh-huh.
But then I realized I couldn't do that because the guy couldn't play.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't even do their version. So,
Mm,
you know, I could
that
do
makes
bass and
sense.
drum. So then I got a group of really good musicians in and played them the demo, and they did a version of it,
Yeah.
and that came up with some ideas, and then the band tried to play that, and then I realized I was flogging a dead, and then I started again with a technology driven idea
Yeah.
that didn't sort of involve the band. It was all about the gear we had at that particular moment. But by that point, we knew the song so well, you know, that because we'd been working on 3 different versions of it.
Uh-huh.
You know? So we managed to do the thing that came out as a record pretty much in one day,
Wow.
just after lunch.
After a
And
lot of trial and error, though, I've had
worked
Julian
like,
Mendelson on here and Gary, and again, several people. Nasher from
yeah, he
Frankie's
mixed
been on
it
here.
too.
He's the one who I think finally came up with the final version that felt right to everybody.
Yeah, Julian did the mix of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But did he say what he did? Because I gave it I gave it to him to mix, and he'd been working on it for about 3 hours. And I went in to hear how it was going. I said, "It doesn't sound great." And I looked at him and I said, "You don't like it, Julian, do you?" And he went, "Not one of your best." Remember him saying that?
Oh, that's great.
You got to start pushing stuff. Got to get
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
it
last
was a good
question.
mix in the end. Julian was great.
He's a legend. He was on here 3 or 4 years ago. Okay, so your process is incredible, but it's also incredibly expensive. And I wondered if that ultimately was worth it for you. You
Well,
may not have been able to work with as many
not on
people.
everything. Not on it.
Oh, not on everything. Okay. Like I know Nasher was
No,
critical of not
honest,
seeing a lot of money from that.
Yeah, Brian Nash didn't write any of the songs. That's the problem, you see. That's why Brian Nash hurt from the from the money thing. All the guys that wrote the songs did really well.
Yeah.
But Nasha didn't. And really, you know, I suppose that's the way things turn out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Nasha didn't play on the first two singles, you know, so that's the way it goes.
Okay.
So he's bound to feel a little bit bitter.
Yeah. I heard you on the Word in Your Ear podcast the other day, and they brought up that Elvis Costello went into the studio and did a whole album in the time it took you to do two tribes, and your response was, yeah, but did he have a hit? And I just thought that's the best response to that I've ever heard. Just own it, you know. I'm Trevor Horn. I make hits. That's what I do.
Yeah. I think they thought I was being a bit rude. I wasn't being a bit rude. Look, believe me, at that point in time, we were trying to get two tribes to sound really great, you know.
Yeah.
And we were putting all of our energy into that, and it wasn't easy. It took a bit of time because a lot of the equipment was new, you know, the synclavier. It was the bass actually on Two Tribes. It took
really
the most time. For some reason, it just took to get us for us to get happy with it.
You're a bass player. Do you ever play bass on these recordings if you can't get it right, or do you always call a session guy?
It depends what it is. Yeah, okay. I play bass on. I play bass on the Dollar records, you know.
Yeah,
I played bass on one track on Lexicon of Love.
Which one?
Know, only during the song All of My Heart.
Once upon a time when we were friends, I gave you my heart. The story ends. No happy ever after. Now we're friends. Wish upon a star if that might help. The stars collide if you decide. Wish upon a star if that might help. What's it like to have loved and to lose her touch? What's it like to have loved and to lose that much? Well, I hope and I pray that maybe someday you'll walk in the room with my heart. Add and subtract, but as a matter of fact, now that you're gone, I still want you back. Remembering, surrendering, remembering that thought. All of my heart.
Oh, that's
the other bass player plays in the intro and at the end, and every time something high on a fret list that you hear, but then it's me for the meat and potatoes stuff.
Oh, that song's a masterpiece. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a cool tune. That one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do sometimes play on things.
Okay, just curious.
I don't play on Stage to the Moon or any of those.
Interesting. When Stock Aikman Waterman come along, do you feel competitive? Do you feel like they're doing something you should be doing or doing differently? Or do you think that's a totally different thing? They can do what they want. I'm going to do my thing.
I thought they were doing a totally different thing. They were making English dance records.
Yeah.
And dance records, you know, are all about finding a catchy title, you know. But they're hard to do, and they were really good at it.
Yeah.
I mean, because at the time when they were being successful, everyone used to moan about them. And I used to say, well, if you think like musicians are fucking stalwart and naked, say, why don't you have a go? See how many you can knock out, right? You try doing that. That's hard to do, man. And they had a point. They had a really happening. And I bet if you played those records now, they'd still make you want to dance.
Yeah, they hold up. They
had a formula. They went in every day and worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They
So,
hold up.
but you're not going to get a whole dance music. The lyrical content is always going to be somewhat limited.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I get it. Well, Trevor, I could do this for hours.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I hope you got something.
I did. Thank you, Trevor, for everything that you put in the world. It's made my life better. Thank you.
All right, there you have it, Trevor Horn. That went pretty well. I wish that it had gone better, but again, technology was not our friend that day. But I still got to talk to Trevor and share the conversation with you. He's still one of the greatest minds that music will ever have. As I mentioned, that book, Adventures in Modern Recording, is one of the greatest music books I've ever read. I have a copy to give away to a Patreon supporter. Now, if you're not a Patreon supporter, the link to sign up is in the description of this show. What's going to happen is, in a few days, I'm going to post a sort of trivia question. Patreon will flag me if I do a straight giveaway. So I've got to do this trivia question thing. I'll put in a question that relates to this conversation. And if you answer, and if you send me the answer, that's a sign to me that you're interested in the book. And then I will do a random drawing this weekend and pick a winner. Okay? So if you have not yet signed up for Patreon, hurry and do that, and you'll be in the running to receive the book. Okay? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to want this book. It's fantastic. I want to close it out with one of the songs that we didn't talk about in here, but that comes up a lot in the book, and it's by the band Dollar. That was one of his first big production jobs that make you think of the Trevor Horn producer that we know of today. And this is a song that he co-wrote called Handheld in Black and White. I love this song. It's pretty amazing to me when you read the book that I was talking about with Trevor, everybody that's mentioned in there, basically, except Ann Dudley, has been on the show. Gary Langan, Bruce Woolley, Julian Mendelsohn, they've all been here, you know? And it's just so much fun to be a part of this world. Speaking of people who have been on the show and work with Trevor, next week's guest is someone, I normally don't put producers back to back, but I'm going to do it next week because we're on a roll here. Next week's guest is Stephen Lipson. That's who we're going to talk to next week, and that conversation was fantastic. No glitches in that one. And if you want to join us later this week, a deep dive is coming out, the one that I've been promising for a while, and it's of an album that Trevor worked on and that came up in this conversation. A previous guest comes back, we deep dive the whole thing. That's what's coming out this weekend, okay? So a lot going on, a lot of great stuff. This is our way of honoring Trevor because he's the best. Huge thanks, as always, to Jan the Man Makevich, my right-hand man, for everything. Gang, you can like our page on Facebook. You can send us a message on there. You can send us an email at thehustlepod@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter at thehustlepod. Okay? Thanks, everybody. We love you.